Could we see a different vibe, a different look with the Bearcats this upcoming season?
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you very much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Do not forget to subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, now up to 461 subscribers and counting. We are rolling. My guest today, it's Wednesday, so that means it's Williams Wednesday. That's Justin Williams from The Athletic, a colleague of mine, someone that I cover. How many games do we cover together, Justin? Had to have been around 100, it felt like. Between football,
between basketball and football.
Yeah, basketball, football, and I'm sure by the end, even though he told me before we came on the air that he's not, quote, hip anymore, I guarantee you that you listening to this and I will learn maybe 3 pop culture references, because if there's anything, Jaron Cumberland is still here to destroy you, right, Justin?
That one has lived on a little bit. So like I said, I don't know. I'm a little washed now, but we'll see if we can give the people something.
Greatest headline in the history, or at least in my time at Cincinnati. Greatest headline, bar none.
I appreciate that. I'll take it, Alex.
On the series, see, this is why we had such a great rapport together. This is why they put me and the 2 people, Caitlin Zylanewski and Ethan Bastian, when we were in Memphis for the conference tournament in 2019, they put us on the lower on press row, like the front row, right next to you, Justin, just so I could get some more insight from you on how to become a better sports reporter. Everything I learned about sports writing, sports reporting, how to get to the bottom of a story from Justin Williams. On a serious note, though, you've been at Camp Higher Ground. You've been at practice. You're going to be on campus. You were on campus yesterday for Luke Fickell's press conference, etc. What is, just give us a sense of what the vibe is around the team, the level, the excitement level, anticipation level for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really high. It's certainly, it makes sense that it's high around the fan base, right? Like you have a year like last year, and that's why you see season tickets sold out and, a lot of anticipation. And then you add on top of that the fact that there's just a lot more interesting storylines, from a reporter perception. Last year's team we knew was going to be really good and, was in all likelihood a better team than this year's team is going to be, the best team in program history. But from my standpoint, there's a lot more storylines, a lot more things to write about this offseason because you have some new starters, some new faces in there. And so I think even that's adding a little bit to the anticipation. There's some unknowns. I think people are, excited about this team. They have a lot of talent. People are optimistic about it, but there's, you're not quite sure just what the ceiling or even the floor of this team would be. And opening with a big game against Arkansas, I think has only fueled that.
By the way, if I didn't formally introduce you, you are a staff writer for, of course, The Athletic. I'm sure everyone listening to this or watching this knows who you are. They read your work, and they very much enjoy it. And, of course, you're also a proud Ohio University alum, so there's that, too. You can follow Justin Williams at Williams_Justin on Twitter. So, obviously, the big storyline, and it's been this way really since January. Do you remember the exact day Ben Bryant transferred back to Cincinnati?
I'd have to look back, but I think it was pretty early January.
Yeah, I remember it being the day after the national championship game, which, by the way, Cincinnati's only 2 losses the last 2 seasons are to Georgia and Alabama, and they played for the national championship back in January. So Ben Bryant returns home, transfers home, and it's created just in this dominant storyline of the offseason. It's created this quarterback battle that, as you wrote recently, may not be over even once the season begins. How much separation does Ben Bryant have over Evan Prater?
I mean, I guess we're going to find out. Certainly Luke Fickell doesn't seem like he plans to make an announcement before the game on Saturday. Some of that is gamesmanship. I do think that internally they know who they are going to have starting and probably have known for a couple weeks now. I've kind of said all offseason, I think it's going to be Ben Bryant for a couple reasons. One being his starting experience last year and, going on the road against a tough top 25 SEC team. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I don't think, the Bearcats want to get into a situation where whoever's the starter is always looking over his shoulder or they're rotating in multiple quarterbacks. I think they want to have a starter who goes in there and is comfortable and commands the offense. But, we've seen in the past, there's always the potential for injuries, minor or major, and that quarterback can have to be ready. You think back a few years ago when Hayden Moore had to come into the Military Bowl. Desmond comes in, starts all season, gets hurt in the first quarter of the Military Bowl. Hayden basically sat on the bench all year and comes in and wins the game for him. So, I know that that's probably something they're reminding both of those guys about, no matter who's the starter. And then, there's always the possibility that, if a guy goes in and struggles or doesn't play well, that you might make a change. I don't think, that's something that Luke Fickell and Gino Guidugli want in that player's head. I don't think they're saying like, hey, you better go out there and play well or we're going to bring the other guy in. I don't think that's the vibe they want to create. But from a fan perspective, that's going to be kind of impossible to ignore when you've set up this tight quarterback race all season.
See, I remember the headline that you wrote from that game, the Military Bowl. Hayden Moore authors perfect ending to Bearcats' career. Now, I do remember that game vividly. I think there was a little uncertainty it set in, certainly amongst me, when I was watching that game. But anyway, this quarterback battle, I was going to go to the start of the 2018 season, because doesn't this kind of give you a vibe like that, Justin? Because remember that year going into the season, we didn't know if it was going to be Hayden Moore or Desmond Ridder. It ended up being Hayden Moore or Desmond Ridder on the depth chart. Ridder ultimately takes over, and, well, the next 4 years were clearly impacted by that. Does this quarterback battle and the start of this season remind you a lot of that season?
It doesn't really, in part because I think in that season, the staff always knew it was going to be Desmond at some point. The concern was he's a redshirt freshman. He was really kind of green and still figuring out his game and how to be a throwing quarterback. And so I think, yes, you go back to maybe there's similarities of Hayden had a little bit more experience, and that's why they put him in for that UCLA game first. But I think if you injected anyone with truth serum that was part of that team, they were like, at some point, Des is going to come in and he's going to take over. And that was their plan, early. I think the third series, they wanted to put Des in. I don't think this is a similar situation in the sense that both these guys are veteran players. They have multiple years of experience in the program, even though Ben transferred away to Eastern Michigan last year. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. Whoever runs out there first on Saturday, I don't think it's going to be a situation where later in the first quarter or in the second quarter, they bring in the other quarterback, as kind of trading off. I do think there's a chance you see both quarterbacks play in some capacity on Saturday, but I think it's whoever is going to win this starting job, whoever has won this starting job, they are going to, he's the starter and he's going to play the vast majority of the snaps. So there's certainly some parallels because it's a quarterback competition, but I think because of the parties involved and where the team is at overall, that there's not too many parallels that apply from 2018.
Interesting. So are you saying that, if Ben Bryant, which I think he is going to be the starter, it sounds like you think he's going to be, I think a lot of people who cover the team are close to the team think he's going to be, but how much then do we see of Evan Prater this season, if at all?
Well, I mean, to say this season, who knows? Because again, that's you're talking about injuries or how somebody plays. Yeah, if we're just saying to start the season, I do think whoever the starter is, you will see both of them play on Saturday, but I don't think it'll be all right, the starter goes in and plays a quarter and then the backup gets a series or the backup gets a couple series. I think it'll be more situational. So if it's Ben, I think I wrote this last week, if it's Ben Bryant as the starter, maybe you find some opportunities where Evan can come in and use his legs and his running ability and kind of be a dynamic playmaker, whether it's in the red zone or a third down or something like that. And vice versa, if Evan Prater's a starter, if there's an obvious passing situation, 2-minute drill drill, or a third and long or some sort. Maybe you mix it up and try and bring Ben in, and either way catch the defense kind of napping or having to adjust to the quarterback. But I don't think Gino Guidugli and Luke Fickell, they've said as much. I don't think they want a true 2 quarterback system. I think they want to have a starter in place and try and roll with that guy.
You wrote that Evan Prater does have elite speed. You also wrote, Justin, that you expect to see more of an aerial attack within the offense this year. This is after Gino Guidugli said earlier in the offseason that he doesn't expect there to be much change within the offense. But now that we're here, 3 days away from the season opener, what do you expect this offense to look like? Because you did mention, hey, this is a deep receiving core, maybe deeper than it's been in years past. And you don't know right now, more on this later in today's show, you don't know what's going to be the case in the running back room. But Justin, how do you see this offense looking like this year? Is there really going to be a more aerial attack, especially if Ben Bryant starts?
Yeah, and that's another reason why I think maybe, Ben makes more sense as the starter again, just in my opinion, because of where the strengths of this team are. I think they have a really good deep receiver group. I think they have 2 NFL tight ends and Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor. And you mentioned I think they have talent at running back. I think the running back room is going to end up being good and maybe someone emerges from there. But at least entering the season, you're not totally sure, all right, who's your every down kind of bell cow running back. And so if you're looking at that, you're like, all right, well, what makes the most sense? Maybe it's the guy who's kind of the more pure pocket passer. Look, it's not going to be like an air raid, UCF, slinging around 50, 60 times a game. Like no Luke Fickell coach team will ever play that way. But I do think if you're just, looking at where their strengths are compared to what this team has done in the past, which, even when it's been more balanced the past couple of years, it's still been a kind of a run first, run focused team. I think maybe that balance just shifts a little bit. Again, I'm not saying it's going to be air it out, West Coast offense, aerial attack, any kind of those kind of things. But I do think with the receivers they have, the tight ends they have, and a good pocket passer in Ben Bryant, that maybe they just throw it around a little bit more than they have in years past.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. I like the sound of throwing the ball around a little bit. All right, speaking of the running back group, we're going to get to that after this live read from Bet Online. Who does emerge from the running back room, and what will Corey Kiner's role, the hometown kid, what will his role look like? Plus, an interesting development on the offensive line that, Justin, thanks to your reporting, I now know about. And I did not know when I read it last night. I was stunned by this little anecdote. We'll get to that in just a few minutes after this word from Bet Online. The the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. That's betonline.net. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, which is gearing up for the pennant race, the NFL, which opening kickoff night is a week from tomorrow, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top. Did I say golf? Okay, golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Justin Williams from The Athletic joining us today on Williams Wednesday. And Justin, I know you travel a lot for The Athletic. I feel like you traveled a lot last year with the team. Which road games are you going to this year for football season?
I know I'm going to be in Arkansas, and then, they actually kind of have the fortune of their next away game is technically at Paul Brown Stadium. So, not much of a road trip there. But then I think their next kind of true away game isn't until October when they play Tulsa. So I haven't even, planned that far ahead yet, but I'm leaving Friday to head to Arkansas. It'll be my first trip to Fayetteville.
That should be a good time. Now, here's a better question. Are you going to Maui in November?
I'm hoping, that's the plan. It's a lot of budget. It's also like, dealing with the family right around Thanksgiving. But my hope is that I'm, sipping from an umbrella straw or something right there that week before Thanksgiving. And, and covering basketball, all that as well.
Well, just don't hang around Bill Walton too much. If he's there, I don't know if he's going to be doing it this year, but oh, jeez. Okay. All right. That was good. Justin Williams, you can follow him on Twitter at Williams_Justin. So you wrote about the running back room recently. You think that by the middle of the season, maybe late middle of the season, early middle potentially, there's going to be a lead running back within that room. How do you see this position unfolding throughout the course of the season, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the depth chart that the team released, they have kind of 4 names listed, and that's, I've written in the past couple of weeks. I do think to start the year, they're going to give all 4 of those guys a chance: Ryan Montgomery, Charles McClellan, Miles Montgomery, Corey Kiner. Now, at running back, it's always good to have depth because that's a high attrition rate in terms of injury at that position. And then I also just think as the season progresses that they're gonna, things are just kind of settle themselves out in that room. I think Ryan Montgomery and Charles McClellan are going to have a role all season, but I think both of those guys are maybe more suited as change of pace backs. I don't know that they're running backs who are best suited to run the ball 15 to 20 times a game. And I think the 2 running backs on the roster who have that potential right now are Miles Montgomery and Corey Kiner. Now, is it a situation where one of those guys emerges and kind of becomes your lead running back? Is it one where they both, even split that role and they're getting 8 to 10 carries each a game? I don't know. I do think we'll figure it out. It'll solve itself one way or another. But I think those are the 2 guys who, when you come to the end of the season, one of those 2 guys is going to have to be your kind of bell cow leading rusher. And Miles Montgomery has looked great. He obviously has a little bit more experience in the program than Corey Kiner does, but anyone from Cincinnati doesn't need to be told, how talented Corey Kiner was and how much Cincinnati wanted him the first time around.
Well, we definitely are aware of that. What do you see his role looking like this season? Because I feel like when you have a guy of his caliber, particularly being from Cincinnati, and we all understand, how surreal it almost felt like when he transferred back here. So what does his role look like this season? Is he the lead running back by the end of the season?
I think there's a very good chance, and that's just going off of, how talented he is and what we've seen in practice, the glimpses. You see why he was such a highly rated, highly coveted recruit coming out of Roger Bacon. He's in a tough spot, though. He didn't come to Cincinnati until after spring practice. Comparing him to like Miles Montgomery, that's Miles. This is his second year in the program. He was here all last year, traveled with the team, things like that. So, Corey has just had basically preseason practice to try and earn kind of that starting lead role, whereas Miles Montgomery has a couple years. And so there's a couple of things there. You kind of have to earn it in this program. Luke Fickell and the coaching staff have shown that. But Miles Montgomery, it's not like he's a guy who's gone in and struggled. Every opportunity he's gotten this offseason, he's done really well. So it's hard to kind of leap Corey over Miles already, considering that Miles has looked really good. I do think, probably just based on how much talent Corey has, that in the end that could win out at some point this season. But I think it'll be a little bit of a slow burn with Corey. If he does get to that point, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it'll be week 1, week 2. I think it could be, a third, a fourth into the season when he really starts to assert himself, if it comes to that.
Whoever does emerge as the lead running back, whoever does start a quarterback, the one thing they will have working for them is an offensive line that returns all 5 starters, or so it seems. Because in your depth chart projection 3.0, Justin, that you wrote recently, you have Lorenz Metz not as a starter. Why?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. Honestly, that's been the talk all offseason. They get all these 5 guys back from the Cotton Bowl. There's a chance that, there's only 2 guys in the same spot entering the season because of how things have moved around. Lorenz Metz had offseason ankle surgery. He's kind of working his way back from that. I think he's starting to feel more comfortable. But you also have a couple guys who have emerged. Joe Huber, who looks like he's going to be the starting right tackle, a walk-on who redshirt sophomore, played a little bit last year, but just, new offensive line coach Mike Cummings loves him. He's kind of that tough and nasty guy they look for. He seems like he's, earned a starting role. And the other name is Gavin Gerhardt, who backup center last year, still is the team's backup center, but has really emerged as a potential starting guard for the offensive line. So it's less an indictment on some of those returning guys and more, some of the development and progress they've made with some of these younger guys like Huber and Gerhardt.
I remember sitting in the Fifth Third media room with you, Chad, and a bunch of other media members, and this was December of 2019. That was when Gavin Gerhardt first signed to play football at Cincinnati. Now he's going to be a starter. Man, where has time gone?
Yeah, and that's, in the program, Luke Fickell always talks about sometimes it takes those offensive linemen a couple years to progress and mature and be ready to play at this level. And I think that's what you're seeing from Gavin Gerhardt. He's going into year 3. He's totally remade his body. And I think they just really like the progress he's made. And whether he wins the starting job or not, I think he's certainly going to have a chance to play this year.
Let's go to the other side of the ball. The position that I'm most excited about this season, honestly, is linebacker. And I'm going to disclose something, and I've already disclosed it once on this podcast. Deshaun Pace is my favorite player on this team. Why? Well, he hails from Cincinnati. He's a very physical linebacker. He's got speed. He can do it all. And it's interesting, Justin, because you mentioned it takes offensive linemen a couple years to develop within this program. Okay, Deshaun Pace comes in 2020, didn't really know who he was. Fast forward to last year. He makes a game-sealing interception in Indiana. He gets an interception in the second quarter that jump-started things in Notre Dame. He had another pick against UCF. He had another pick against, I think, South Florida. And now all of a sudden, he might be this team's best defensive player. But as you've written, his brother might have something to say about that. But just how good can this linebacker room be?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the strength of last year's defense was the secondary, and the whole defense was great, but you had the best cornerback duo in the country in Sauce and Kobe Bryant and Brian Cook, who's a second-round NFL draft pick. Like, that's tough to beat. I think it could be the linebacker group this year. You mentioned, the Pace brothers. I think both of them, all that instinctive playmaking you saw from Deshaun Pace last year, Ivan Pace has those same characteristics. He's just kind of in a different body, comes in a different package than Deshaun did. But I think you're going to see both of them making a lot of plays this season. Will Huber takes over at middle linebacker, really smart, 6-year guy, great leader. I think they love, his size and what potentially brings there. And then, add in 2 more guys, Ty Van Fossen, who's going to rotate with Deshaun Pace, and Jaheim Thomas, 4-star, another local kid who's going to rotate with Ivan Pace. I really feel like at 3 positions there, you go 5 deep at linebacker. And I think they're going to try and figure out, how can we get 4 of those guys on the field at the same time, just because of how good that group can be.
Talk about the Greater Miami Conference and how great it is at producing these players from Coleraine and Princeton. My goodness, there's a bevy of talent on this team. Speaking of corners, you teased it in your answer there, Justin. We're going to get to that after we hear from 2 of our sponsors. Just how concerned should we be about the cornerback position and who replaces Sauce and Kobe? We'll get into it after a word from 2 of our sponsors. Justin Williams of The Athletic joining us today on Williams Wednesday. Just I'm trying to come up with another fun question to come back from break. I'm trying to think of here's one. Have you done TRX recently?
I have no idea what TRX is.
What was it? What was the workout that Amy Fickell did that you took part in last year?
That was that? Bar 3, I believe, is what it was called.
God. It sounds even worse than
no,
TRX.
I have not done that again. I don't ever intend to do it again. I'm lucky that I made it out alive from that one class. But every time I see Amy, she makes sure to needle me and ask if I ever want to do another class. But I have no intention of that.
Yeah, I've got a workout I invented from a Ray Lewis TED Talk. So if you ever want insight on that, just let me know, because
sounds good.
That I guarantee you, though, it's not Bar 3. I mean, if you listen to this, have not read that article, please do, because it is something. It truly is. Anyway, so the cornerback room. How concerned should we be, Justin? Because as you said, you're replacing 2 All-Americans, the best tandem in the country. I mean, heck, you're replacing the guy who now has his own sauce of Buffalo Wild Wings. So how concerned should we be?
I don't know if concern's the right word. I mean, I think people need to understand it's just not going to be as good as it was last year, the past couple of years. And that's the way it is everywhere in the country. Like, last year was a special kind of once in a generation situation for the Bearcats. I think they have a lot of talent. I think they have a lot of capability back there with guys like Arquan Bush is coming back. That's going to be huge. JQ Hardaway, who's, this true freshman, looks like he's going to be kind of the next star at some point in his career, probably sooner rather than later. Sammy Anderson, they feel really good about him as kind of a guy, I think, entering year 3 in the system. So they have talent. They have, guys who I think are going to play well and be good players here over the next couple years. But fans, and the team alike, they just have to understand it's not Sauce and Kobe. There might be some busted coverages every now and then that people didn't see last year. There might be some 3rd down completions that people didn't see last year. And that's okay. It's just kind of a return to normalcy a little bit after, just a really remarkable situation they've had recently.
Turn to normalcy. So you're saying that there might be some touchdowns given up. on the boundary side of the field. I mean,
There's potential that like someone might catch a 50-yard touchdown pass this season, and fans are
Yeah.
going to lose their mind, and I understand why. But they just have to remember, like that's football. That sometimes happens when you don't have a top 5
Yeah.
pick and the Thorpe Award winner playing cornerback.
It's true. I keep forgetting that Kobe actually won that award. Like I have to remind myself that's how good the cornerback room was. Okay. You recently wrote an article that I found really fascinating: truths and myths about the Bearcats football season. And the last what was it? Premise was the Bearcats getting back to the college football playoff this year. You said truth. Why?
I believe I said the possibility that they could get back.
That's right. You did. Okay.
As I wrote in there, and I want to make clear, I do not think they will get back to the college football playoff this year. I certainly wouldn't make that prediction. But I think kind of the general understanding among people is like, well, last year they had their chance because of the way the schedule set up, non-conference with Notre Dame and Indiana to get to the playoff. And that's just not going to happen moving forward. But if you actually kind of break it down, Indiana wasn't very good last year. They didn't really
No.
benefit at all from winning, that game in terms of like a college football playoff sense. And they play Indiana again this year at home. But if you're looking at, well, they knocked off a top 10 team in Notre Dame that went on, didn't lose any other regular season games. They ran the table, won their conference tournament. Conceivably, they could do that again this year if they beat Arkansas, and then Arkansas goes on to have this miraculous season after that and, make it to the SEC championship game or win the SEC, and Cincinnati runs the table at the same time. That would technically be a better resume than they had last year, knocking off Notre Dame. I do not think that's going to happen. I'm not predicting that Arkansas will win the SEC West or anything like that. But if you're just looking, in late August before the season starts and saying there's a zero path for Cincinnati to make the college football playoff again, I don't think that's true. I don't think it's likely they do it, but I think there's at least the possibility if we're going off of how they got there last year.
Yeah. So you're saying if they go 13-0, now the unfortunate thing is this: they're still a Group of 5 school for this year. So you're saying if they go 13-0, which very well could happen, I'm not going to rule it out. If they go 13-0 and having gone to the playoff last year and going to the Big 12 next year, shouldn't that warrant consideration to get back into the playoff this year?
Again, you have to look at how all the stars aligned last year. They still needed some 2-loss conference champions. They still needed Baylor to stop Oklahoma State on the goal line right at the end. You needed Ohio State to lose some games, things like that. So you have to go back and look at, they needed every single thing to go right last year, and it happened for them to get in. They would need that to happen again this season, which again would include Arkansas being like a top 10 team after, Cincinnati would beat them in week 1. Very unlikely, probably not going to happen. But to say that there's no chance it happens, I think would be unfair.
I remember standing on the field because I worked for ABC Sports for the conference championship. And I think I talked to you a few minutes before this happened. I was standing on the field watching the end of the Baylor Oklahoma State game on my phone. It was heart stopping, that goal line stand. I mean, it was literally inches. And who knows if Oklahoma State would have leapfrogged Cincinnati the next day. I mean, that's how close it was. Now,
yeah, I remember they showed it like up in the press box, and as the game went final, you could kind of see out in the stands, people starting to realize Oklahoma State lost.
Yeah.
Basically, at that point, knowing if Cincinnati wins that game against Houston, it's almost impossible to keep them out. That was kind of a really cool moment.
That was a cool. Really, everything about that day. From what you remember, were you on the field at the end of that game? Because I know.
Yeah, I came down for the end.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember seeing you, Chad, and a bunch of other reporters. I mean, that felt like a movie after that game, truly. Now, here's something else that I think about when it comes to if the Bearcats go 13-0, can they go back to the playoff? Do you think that the committee thinks about, if there's a star player like last year, the Bearcats had Sauce and Desmond Ridder? Do you think that matters for a team trying to get into the playoff, having that star, having that player that will attract ratings during the playoff? Does that matter, Justin, to you?
I hope not, but I'm not one who's going to try and figure out whatever the committee thinks about this process, because we've seen them make just kind of strange, curious decisions in the past in terms of how they rank teams and all that kind of stuff. So I couldn't possibly say what is important to them, but no, I don't think that, Cincinnati not having Sauce Gardner or something like that would work against them. Again, I think it's all just kind of about how everything falls into place. And last year it almost became inevitable. Like Cincinnati had to get put in because of how everything went down around them. It doesn't always work out that cleanly, but I don't know that having a star player necessarily impacts their decision one way or another.
Here I am. That's Sunday. This is another true story. So this is what Justin and I do. We just tell all these great stories from covering the Bearcats together. So, Justin, I was okay. So the Sunday, the day after the championship game, Selection Sunday, which apparently now means something in football in addition to basketball at Cincinnati. So I'm walking to Paul Brown Stadium for the Bengals Chargers game the next day, and I'm watching the selection show on my phone, and I didn't feel relieved until I saw Cincinnati's name get unveiled in that 4 spot. Like, I still thought, you never know, we could be put at 5. You never know. Like,
yeah, I think a lot of fans felt that way.
And at that time, the Cincinnati sports curse still existed. It was a month and 10 days from being broken. So there's that. I'm sure you're gonna have much more on this game Saturday at Arkansas in your coverage in The Athletic. How does Cincinnati beat Arkansas Saturday straight up?
I think they're going to have to stop the run, because my guess is Arkansas and, pretty much any team that feels like they have the capability is going to put on that Cotton Bowl tape and see that that's how Alabama beat them last year. Even though the secondary looks a lot different, I think that how Cincinnati navigates that 3-man front, 4-man front, however they handle that, they're going to have to prove to Arkansas, which is a very good running team, that they can stop the run for Arkansas to change that game plan, in my opinion. So that's the biggest thing for me to watch. Again, I think Cincinnati has weapons on offense. I think they're going to be able to score. I think they have a solid defense, but I think they're going to have to prove, we can stop Arkansas from running the ball up the middle, and then kind of see where the game goes from there.
Not only that, but you watch KJ Jefferson. I mean, you look at the highlights from last year and you watch the tape from last year. I mean, he reminds me of prime Cam Newton, and that's a scary sentiment, because here's a quarterback who can not only throw, but he can run, and he's physical. He's not trying to slide to protect himself. He's going to fight for those extra yards. But I do agree with you, Justin, that against the revamped, retooled secondary in Arkansas, I think Cincinnati can score some points.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of attack them. Arkansas has some good players. They have a really good NFL caliber safety, but that's, Cincinnati attacked Kyle Hamilton last year at Notre Dame, and I don't think they're going to back down from anyone in terms of defense. Yeah, for me, the real kind of interesting matchup here is, how does Cincinnati's defense match up with Arkansas's offense? Because I think if Cincinnati can, maybe not shut them down, but at least kind of manage Arkansas offensively, I think Cincinnati has the weapons to be able to keep it a close game on offense.
It's a nationally televised game on ESPN. Justin, you will be there in Fayetteville, so fans can follow your coverage of the Cincinnati Bearcats. You can follow Justin on Twitter at Williams_Justin, staff writer for The Athletic, part of Williams Wednesdays here on Locked On Bearcats. Justin, we're going to do this again throughout the football season. Excuse me. And men's basketball season. I truly don't know how you do all that you do for The Athletic. Plus, you've got a family, a wife, and 3 kids. But I mean, best wishes to your family. Best wishes to you. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. And just let's just enjoy the ride that's going to be this season. It's a little different, as you said, but at the same time, the excitement level is still way up here. But thank you again, Justin, for coming on, and best wishes to you and your family.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. It was always great talking to you.
Justin Williams from The Athletic, part of Williams Wednesdays here, leading up to the Bearcats' first regular season game Saturday against the Arkansas Razorbacks. Good conversation. John Neighbors, Locked On Arkansas, joins me tomorrow for the crossover leading up to the game Saturday. Thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022. It's an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network and Odyssey NFL Insiders all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. You can follow me on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, or email me at alex3frank@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, up to 461 subscribers and counting. and follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. That's going to do it today for Locked On Bearcats. Thanks for making us your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John Neighbors, Locked On Razorbacks, joins me tomorrow for the crossover. Until then, I'm Alex Frank for the Locked On Bearcats podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great last day of August. And I'll be back in September tomorrow with John Neighbors, Locked On Razorbacks. Until then, have a great rest of your day.